Okay, welcome again. I'm Christy Coolis with M3 Insurance, and M3 is going to be the Wisconsin Conference and all the churches' new broker partner for your insurance coverages for property, casualty, auto, work comp, all of those coverages. M3 is a Wisconsin-based independent agency. We've got 7 offices in addition to our home office in Madison, Wisconsin. I am the client executive that will be handling the overall relationship for your account. Basically, think of me as the chief risk advisor for the Wisconsin Conference and all of your individual churches. I have a team behind me as well. One of those members is Dylan Byrne. Dylan is on the call with us. Dylan, do you just want to introduce yourself too?
Absolutely. So my name is Dylan Byrne. I'm based in Madison, Wisconsin here. I'm the client manager along with my counterpart, Ashley Azelson. Here to support, here to help. I've spoken with a few of you on the phone so far. So good to meet everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, Dylan. And thank you to everyone who's on the call, everyone who has already maybe visited the link or used the worksheet to start providing your information about your church. We really appreciate that. It's the first step really in the process for us to put together an alternative insurance program for you to replace Church Mutual. One of the differences about M3 that will be a little new for you when you've been used to working with Church Mutual. Church Mutual was your agent and your insurance carrier. M3 will be your agent, and we represent many insurance carriers. So we're your advocate. We work for you. We're here to help you navigate the insurance landscape, claims, and get the best coverage and deal for you. We don't at this point know what the insurance carriers will be yet. We need all the information from all of you, but once we have that back, we will approach the market, get competitive quotes, and be able to share with you who the carrier lineup will be when that's done. The plan will be to have everyone with the same carrier if possible, but if there's any outliers, if there's maybe a church that has some poor loss experience or there's something unique about it that the main carrier does not want to provide coverage, we have other options. So everyone will have coverage through M3. We will be able to handle everyone's exposures, everyone's churches. So first step, what I'd like to go over this morning is the link that was sent out to everyone to provide information about your church, your exposures, your risk. That's key for us to have that information to take it to the marketplace. So I'm going to share my screen and walk through that, basically a little demo. Just a moment. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes. But is it possible to get that printable so that we can print it and fill it out?
Yes.
And okay.
Yes.
That's what
we also provided a PDF copy that is printable. Sarah, were you able to get that out to everyone too?
We did send it out, and we're also putting it on the website.
Perfect.
So check there. We thought it would be good if you could print it out, fill it all out before you start keying it in.
Agreed.
And before the end of the call, I'll let you know exactly where it is.
okay.
And actually, I'll bring up that worksheet first. This is what the worksheet looks like, and it can be printed out, and you can fill out, gather all the information, and it is in the exact order that the online version is. So it should be easy to follow. So this has everything listed out along with all of the options, all the multiple choice pieces. So it looks long, but it's just because all of the choices are there for you. Like, for example, what type of roof do you have? All the options are listed. So it makes the document look longer and a little bit more scary than it is. But if this works for you, if you want to print this out and gather all the information and then go to the website to put it in, that's perfect. So we pop back over to the website. When you click the link, you will come to this landing page. There's a few tips, which were also included in the email, but basically it would be a good idea to have, if you didn't already pre-fill out that worksheet, to have your policies nearby, to have somebody who's knowledgeable about your buildings and things like when was it built, when was the roof last updated, to have that information helpful and nearby. We did estimate time to complete this to be 20 to 40 minutes. We wanted to be conservative with that estimate. I think it's very likely it'll take you less time, but you do have to complete it in one sitting. So there's no ability to save it as you go. That's where I think that paper worksheet can come in handy as you're going through it, because you can fill out the paper worksheet and then come over and do it online. So I'm just going to run through a test demo to show you what this looks like. But again, drop any questions in the chat. Dylan will be watching those, or unmute yourself and jump in. So it's asking for contact information. And this is, we want to know, how should we contact you? Who's the best person for the insurance and anything related to it? And how do you prefer to be contacted?
They quote the.
And when you hit next, it brings you to this next section. It's going to flow down these steps on the right-hand side. Then you put in your information. And it won't let you proceed without filling something out. So if I maybe, get the address in and try to go to next, it will say, hey, you missed some things. You have to fill in the rest of this. Then we're asking some questions about the building. Is it open 24/7? Do you have any third-party maintenance contracts? So things like snow removal or landscaping. And have you had any claims in the last 5 years? If you say no.
How do you differentiate if you have the church building and a parsonage building at a different address, though?
Yeah, great question. This will be the first building you choose to enter, and then you'll have an option to enter additional buildings and additional addresses. If you say yes to the insurance claims section, the system has all kinds of dependencies set up. So if you say yes, it will now ask you to provide details about that. So maybe you had a small fire, in 2022, started by electrical issue. 25K in damages. As much detail as you can provide so that we know not only what happened, but if you know the cause of why it happened and approximate dollar amount.
For the third-party maintenance contracts, would that also involve, like, if you have a yearly contract for boiler inspection and work, or HVAC units? Would that be under that category?
Yes, you could click the maintenance box for that. Yes, correct. Good question.
I have a question.
Yes.
What about if you operate a homeless shelter in your lower level of your church for 6 months out of the year? So when it says, is it open 24/7? What do you check there?
Is the homeless shelter portion open 24/7 during that time period? I would click yes.
Okay.
And there will be a section later to provide details about the homeless shelter too.
Are the contracts to be written or verbal?
Ooh, do you have some verbal?
Yes.
Okay. I think verbal or written is fine. We want to know, what we want to get to is the root of, are you handling these things yourself, your employees or your volunteers, or do you have someone else doing it? Especially
maintenance.
Taking care of the parking lot and sidewalk and things like that. So if you have a verbal contract, I would still say yes.
Hey, I have a question on the annual budget because we are in the middle of working on ours now, and our budget this year will be very different from 24. Which one do we use, 24 or 20, proposed 25?
Proposed 25.
Okay.
So I provided the information on the claims, so we're going to hit next and go to the next section. And this is where we provide information about that first building that you've entered at that first address. So for some of you, you maybe only have one building and one address. But for those of you that have more, this is for the first one that you want to put in. So building usage, you pick church, but if there's something that isn't here, you can hit other and you can type in what the usage is.
Christy, it looks like we've got the question from several people about what if your building was built over several years with several additions? What kind of year do you put in there? And what if your roof has several different types of roofing?
Yeah, those are good. Those are great questions too. So the year that it was built, we need the original first year. If part of the structure from that first oldest date is still there, that's the first date to put in. You can share, information in the updated years about the roof update years. So that would be the most recent, same thing with the wiring. But if you have a building that originally the first section was built in 1910 and you've added on various times, but the 1910 section is still there, we want to go with 1910. Does that help? Okay.
Yes, and I'll say there are some questions in the chat that I'll save till the end that have to do kind of with the overall plan.
Mm-hmm.
So right now we'll let Christy cover this questionnaire, and then at the end we'll cover more of the overall plan and implementation dates and whether or not you have to be a part of it.
That sounds good. So construction type for your building. And if you have multiple construction types, choose the one that is the majority of the building. Sidewalk and parking lot condition, this is subjective, but if you've got sidewalks that are uneven and cracked, if you have a parking lot that's, filled with potholes or maybe is dirt and mud, use your best judgment on what the condition is in your opinion. Is the building vacant? So if you have any buildings that are not occupied, they're not used, no one goes there on a regular basis, you're not using it for storage, that would be considered vacant. And then we want to know more about the building. How many stories, what year it was built, the square footage, the building limit. So this is the number that we will be looking to use as a basis for insuring the building. What type of roof you have, the year the roof was updated, the type of wiring that you have, the wiring update year. And all of this gets very granular, but these are all important information for property underwriters when they're looking at your risk. And if any of these, if no one knows, use your best guess. That's all that we can ask is use your best guess if no one is around who knows this piece of information anymore.
I'm saying, I can't believe they're just letting people do them, but you can use our current building.
I don't know, is the building sprinkler? Do you have smoke detection?
Are we muted?
We're muted now.
Is there a central station alarm? So basically it is, if there is a fire at your building, is there an alarm that rings somewhere else or is it just local? If it rings somewhere else to a security company or directly to the fire department, that would be a central station alarm. Do you have a security system?
So on the building limit, do we estimate what the value of our building is?
Or use current coverage.
Or use what we have for current coverage?
So typically using what you have for current coverage is a good starting point. I know that in some of my conversations with Sarah, it sounds like some of the buildings that are probably over-insured. So if you have a different estimate you would like to use, that works. I will tell you too that one of the things with gathering this information, one of the things that we'll be doing is looking at what are your individual plans if that building were to be a total loss. Would you rebuild? How would you rebuild? Would it be in a similar size, similar materials? Or would you potentially, you know, rent a space instead? And that will help us determine whether or not you need to, whether or not it's recommended you insure for full replacement value or a lower value, like actual cash value. If you have any outdoor signs that are not attached to the building that you want to insure, that's where that information goes. Your business personal property, so that's the contents inside the building. So if you picked up the building and shook it, everything that falls out, basically. This is coverage for income and extra expense. So if you had a loss, a property loss, but still, you know, couldn't use the building or needed to get temporary space to operate in for the building. Property in the open is property outside. So maybe you have playground equipment, or, you know, a dugout, flagpole, those types of things. And if you don't have anything for these, or you don't want any coverage for these, you can just put 0. Fine arts, if you have any artwork to be insured separately. This is that question that I mentioned. So if you had a complete loss, what would you do? And so let's say we would rebuild. Are we going to do similar size and similar materials? Similar size and different materials? Smaller size, similar materials? Smaller size and different materials? Because if you have a really large building now, but maybe your, you know, congregation is small and shrinking, it's very likely you wouldn't rebuild in that same manner. And so that this question helps us figure out how best to insure the building for you. Movable equipment, lawnmower, snow blower, that kind of stuff. Do you have any? Yes. How much? Do you have a preventative maintenance program in place? And this is where, do you need to add more buildings to this location? So if you say yes, you're going to get another screen with all of these same questions. If you say no, it's going to ask you, do you want to add more locations? So this would be if you have more buildings to add with different addresses.
May I ask a question about the preventative maintenance program?
Yes, of course.
How is that different than what you talked about earlier in terms of like third-party maintenance contracts? So what is a preventive maintenance program?
Yeah, so there's overlap there. So if you have some maintenance contracts with an HVAC provider and they come in annually, you know, to do an inspection and any updates, that would count as preventative maintenance program in place. It's more about, do you have a proactive plan in place to try and take care of things before they break down and go wrong, essentially.
So can you, Christy, go over those last 2 questions? So one is, if you have another building at that same location, same address, would that include a shed or a garage?
Yes. Yes, it would.
Okay, so that would be another building at the same location. And alternatively, if they had a parsonage at a different location, then they would say yes to the, do you need to add more locations?
Correct. And then that will give you the ability to enter a whole new address.
So I'm so sorry. You also said property in the open, which I interpreted as meaning things like sheds, but you're saying that we might need to add those as buildings instead.
Yes, so that's a great clarification. Sheds, garages, those are considered buildings. So that would be another building if you have a shed. Property in the open is non-buildings, playground equipment. If you have maybe some sort of like makeshift dugout for, you know, softball or baseball that's not really covered like a building, gazebo, those types of things for property in the open.
Now, what about if the shed is attached to the church? It's not detached.
Yeah, so that would just be a second building at the same location.
Even though it's attached to the building?
Were they originally attached?
Yes, it's a part of the structure that it was originally built.
Okay, thank you.
Purpose.
Thank you for clarifying. I would count that as one building then, the church shed together.
Thank you.
So if you have like a bell tower that's separate from the church, is that a building or is that a something else?
Property in the open.
I would put that as a building. And I would label it as bell tower.
And then solar panels will be included in that
Yes, correct.
property in the open?
Mm-hmm.
My question would be a fellowship hall that is built in the 1950s and the church sanctuary built in the early 1900s. They are attached, but they're distinctly different buildings.
Mm-hmm.
One building, two buildings, how do I describe that?
So in that case, I would describe it as two buildings, even though they're
Okay.
attached. But if you did it as one, that would not be the end of the world.
Okay.
And
Do
if,
we have to fill out this entire form on every single outbuilding?
Yes, ideally. How many do you have approximately?
Well, we only have two, but or actually two and a parsonage. But that seems really a lot of work. We got to go through all this wiring. We got to go through every single question on this. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Would that be a good question for Dylan then? If they have some oddities like that they want to check in with Christy?
Yes, I mean, we certainly want to make this as easy as we can, but we also do need the information to take it to the insurance carriers to provide coverage for the outbuildings. But if it's easier for you to send an email, to Dylan and I and say, hey, we've got two sheds, this is the value they're built in this year, this is the construction, we can make that work also.
Christy, can I ask you a question going back to the property limit?
Yes.
As I recall, with Church Mutual, we insure the church at an agreed value with 100% co-insurance. And I don't see a question about co-insurance on the form here. Is that going to come into play?
So my philosophy on co-insurance is to avoid it when possible, because the co-insurance penalty, if you aren't insuring to the appropriate co-insurance value, can really be a problem in the event of a loss. So we would be looking for agreed value on any replacement costs, which would waive the co-insurance penalty. And if we're doing functional replacement cost or actual cash value, those would be options for anyone looking who wouldn't rebuild in the same manner. And then co-insurance also would not apply. It's a great question, Bill.
Thank you.
Hey, Christy, I have a question regarding our church, which is made up of an education wing that was built far more recently than what the original church was built. And the original church had been moved twice to new location. So what do I go by as far as approximate year of the original church being built?
Approximately how many years between the original church being built and when it was moved the last time?
I'd have to look at the history. I don't know that off the top of my head.
Okay.
It was built originally in the 1800s.
I would probably, because it's been moved, I'd probably go with the moved date.
That's what I was thinking as well.
That would be what I would go with, is the most recent moved date, because while that's not a new build, there's obviously work that's involved with moving.
There was a lot of work, plus a basement was put under it at that time.
Yeah, I would go with the most recent move date.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
I've got a question about sheds and outbuildings.
Yes.
And you're going through the form and you're filling it out and then it says HVAC, but there's no HVAC in the shed. How do you indicate that that's not applicable?
Yeah, good clarification. You can hit other and none. Or NA, either one that works.
I have a question.
Another question pertaining to the sheds. Now, if you have a shed with like a mower and you don't want to insure, you can go and be fine with that, correct?
Yes, That's correct.
Okay, okay.
So I have a question. We have 2 sheds with outside equipment, mowers and snow removal and so forth. So do we have to fill out a form for each of those sheds?
But if they're separate buildings, yes.
Okay.
So just so clarification on my part, our church was built in the early 1900s. There was an addition put on 25 years ago with bathrooms and a fellowship hall. Are you saying I need to treat that as 2 separate buildings, even though it's heated by one heating and air conditioning system?
There's flexibility there. You do not have to treat it as 2 separate. If they're sharing all those systems and it's easier to do it as one, that's okay too.
Thank you.
We purchased the building that we're currently in 10 years ago. And a lot of these questions, we have no idea, like when was the roof last updated?
Best
And when
guess.
was the HVAC last updated? Because it was done before we purchased the building.
I would say your best guess then. That's all that you can do. If no one knows that information, your best guess.
I'm going to ask if we can let Christy get through the whole form so that you can see it. And then I'm going to take note of all of the questions and we'll try to hit them more at the end, just so that she can walk through it and you can see it. I think what we're understanding here is how difficult it is to insure churches, which is why some insurance carriers are getting out of covering churches, because you were built at numerous different times with numerous different roofs, numerous different outbuildings, and lots of individual stories. So let's get through the whole form. I will let you know where the website is, where everything is at. And then we'll also show you in the letter that came out on Monday, it has Christy, Ashley's, and Dylan's phone numbers, and you can ask some of your individual church questions to them.
Correct. Thank you, Sarah. And I want to reiterate, we know this is asking time and effort from all of you to provide this information. And I know that it's not the easiest thing to do, but we do really appreciate all of your help, and it will help us get you the proper coverage at the best price. That's the goal here. I've been doing this for 18 years, and the market that we're in currently, especially with property, is the most difficult market in my almost 20-year career. It's tough. Churches are unique also, that makes it even harder, and underwriters want to know this information. And that's the unfortunate reality. So really appreciate your help. And like Sarah said, we're available for individual calls or emails to walk through something with you, or to get your individual story and add that to the information.
I do apologize that we need to ask you for this information. Unfortunately, Church Mutual considers all of this information that they have gathered as your church, as your provider, to be proprietary information, and they will not share it with us. So we have, over the last 2 months, tried to get as much information from Church Mutual as we could, but they would not share individual church information with us. So that's why we're needing to get it from you in as much detail as we can and as quick as we can. But over time, you know, they will be coming out to your buildings. We will find out more about you. We can fine tune it as we go along. But this is kind of the best way that we can get the information quickly to get you moved over, because we were unable to come up with a good answer with Church Mutual.
Correct. Thank you, Sarah. Ideally, if Church Mutual would have provided all of this, that would have helped a lot, but they're not willing to. This is also a one-time lift. We'll keep this information then. So for the first renewal, we won't have to ask you these same pieces, these same questions, because we'll have it and we'll maintain it. So we'll keep moving along. I answered yes to adding more locations. I meant to say no. So when I say no more buildings, no more locations, we go to the liability section. And this is a lot of yes or no questions with a few additional pieces. So are you having any annual events? Think about big things. Are you having a big picnic? Do you put on a festival? Do you do a Badger tailgate party? This is subjective. I would say don't overthink it. If you answer no, and then later you realize, oh, we have a church picnic every year. It's okay. It's not going to be the end of the world. Are you doing any international travel? Mission trips or anything like that? If you hit yes, it wants to know approximately how many. Do you have a playground? Rehabilitation housing. I forget which individual asked about the homeless shelter, but this is part of that section. So if you have homeless shelter, if you're doing any, drug and alcohol, shelters, anything like that, hit yes for the rehab. Do you have any youth programs? If you answer yes, we would like to know more about that and how many kids. 15 and their ages. And do you want to add another one? If you have a second program, you can hit yes and ask the same questions. Do you have a daycare? And what are the age ranges of the children in the daycare? And we ask these questions because this is another piece. Daycares are a hot button issue for insurance carriers, and they want to know if you have one, and they want to know how young the children are, because there's a different exposure with infants versus toddlers. Do you have a child abuse prevention program in place? Do you perform background checks on your employees and your volunteers? Do you offer employee benefits? And if you do, who do you offer them to? So I know Sarah mentioned that the pastors typically are receiving their benefits from the conference. So if your pastor is the only one you're offering benefits to, you can put pastor here, and we know that they're getting the benefits from the conference, but maybe you've got pastor and, secretary. Or you can say, if you've got several employees, you're like all employees. That's okay too. Are you sponsoring any recreational activities? Do you have a softball league? Do you have a bowling, team? And you hit next, and it goes to the next section about your workers' compensation. This is one that I highly recommend. Pull out your church mutual policy, and you can get this information directly from your church mutual policy. And unless you've had significant changes to your employee base, so maybe you had 5 employees and now this coming year you're only going to have 1. Otherwise, this information should be very close to what you have on your current policy with Church Mutual. So your federal employee ID number, you put that in. Oops, it's not letting me. How many employees do you have? How many volunteers do you have? Again, an approximate number. And then directly on your policy, and I will after this, I'll bring up a copy of a Church Mutual work comp policy to just show you where to find this too. But the class code is going to be 9101, and you want to put in that annual payroll for those employees for that class code. So you put that in, then you have the 8868 class code, same thing, put that number in. And if you have any camp operations, put payroll there. If you don't have any, it's 0. And then we want to know if you have a return to work program in place. This could be written or not written. And basically trying to get at if an employee, let's say a pastor, slips and falls on the ice, breaks his leg, my assumption is, especially if he's the pastor, he's still going to be working. He's probably going to be in a boot and maybe a cast and on crutches, but he's still going to be working. Or the reverse of that would be somebody's injured and they've got restrictions and they are off and they're being paid by work comp, but they're not working. So we want to know, are you actively getting people back to work and accommodating restrictions if there's an injury? And do you have an experience modification factor? This is only going to apply to the larger churches with larger employees on staff. So if you have one, you hit yes and provide that factor. If you don't have one, you just hit no. Next, and now we're going to ask about vehicles. Do you do any short-term vehicle rentals? So this is, think of, you know, a 1 to 2, you know, 1 to 3 day trip, those kind of things. We're not talking about long-term leased vehicles. This would be short-term rental. Maybe you rent to go to a conference. You hit yes. We want to know what type of vehicles you're renting, you know, select all that apply. You provide any group transportation, you know, do you have a bus? Are you getting a bus? Are you transporting, you know, 25 kids to camp once a year? And then the final question is, do you want to add any leased, so that's long-term leased or owned vehicles? So does the church own or lease any vehicles? If the answer is no, you just hit no and move to the next section. If you hit yes, we will need the VIN, the year, make, and model for each one. And if you have a lot, if you have more than 5 and you get to the bottom, you can say, yes, we want to add some more, and it'll give you more lines. The next section is the cyber section. This section is, again, a lot of yes or no questions. What we're trying to figure out is what kind of cyber exposure do you have, and what kind of minimum controls do you have in place? So does your church have a website? Are you using ACH or wiring any funds? Do you have digital records? Do you have a network? Are you using multi-factor authentication for email? So meaning if you're logging in remotely to the network to access your email, is there 2 ways that you have to authenticate? Your password plus maybe it's a push notification, or do you get a phone call that you have to answer and confirm it's you? Are you doing any security awareness training related to cybersecurity? So this could be phishing training, could be even phishing testing to see who falls for, you know, a fake email, clicks on a link. Are your IT systems backed up? Do you have email? Are you doing any online banking? Any outsourced digital records? Do you have internet access? Another multi-factor authentication question for remote access, same kind of thing. And are you using antivirus or endpoint protection? And if you get to the bottom and you're like, I have no idea, I don't know about the answers to any of these questions, click whatever you want to get through this. And then this final question is basically saying, I need help. And so if you hit yes, myself, Dylan, or Ashley will reach out to you to talk through this section to get a better idea of what your cyber exposure is. Hit next and we go to the crime section. We want to know how much cash you might have on hand at your locations. Again, best guess. Tell us about your deposit procedure. You know, is it twice a week? And then we're asking about controls related to banking. You know, does someone other than the person responsible for reconciling the bank accounts make the deposits? Same kind of thing. What about withdrawals? What about signing checks? Do you require, you know, 2 signatures for checks? And the final question is asking if you have a disaster recovery plan in place. And if the answer is no, this is something that M3 can help with in the coming year also. So you hit next. And it comes to the final screen saying, yep, I did my best. Everything's accurate to my, you know, best of my knowledge. You hit submit. And now, if you have your policies, we would like you to upload your insurance policies and a driver's list if you have drivers. If you said your sidewalk condition was poor, we'd like a picture. If you have an experience mod worksheet, you can upload that here also. If you know there's something else that you think it's important for us to know, something that you want to share, feel free to upload it here. And so you put in your email. And this is where you can just drag and drop the files in, and they'll upload directly to us. And then on our end, we will get notification that you filled out the assessment. We'll get all the answers and we'll get all the documents, and we'll be able to start going through everything and then compiling it, putting it together to use with the carriers. I know that was a lot.
I'm going to start with some simple things then, or overall, if I could have the screen for just a second.
Yes. You should be able to share.
Okay. So you were asking where you could find this information. If you go to the Wisconsin Conference website, which is www.wisconsinumc.org, and then I went to boards and agencies and selected Board of Trustees. That's who handles insurance. And you can go down here to new church property insurance information. If you want to see the original letter that went out on Monday, it's right there, read more. If you want to get to the link to fill out this insurance form, click there. If you want to download the PDF form so that you can fill it out first before you start doing, you can click there. And then if you want to see the contact information to call with any questions, here's our team. Okay, so you can find everything that you need right there on the conference webpage. And the question about whether or not you needed to be under this insurance, we did cover that in the first page. I think in the first letter that went out, I thought we did. We've been asked if churches needed to follow this plan or not. I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. And there is a conference policy. It's 130.2.0 that says all local churches in the Wisconsin Conference, along with the conference camps, conference center, and other conference-owned property are required to be insured under the conference-wide insurance program. So there is a history about how that came about with the church that suffered a total loss and didn't have enough insurance, and other churches came to be. But the group plan has been around since 1998. The trustees review it every 4 years to determine whether it's the best place to be. Church Mutual has been the best coverer for all of these years. But in the last 2 years especially, we have found that the rates have been increasing. What we felt was out of line. We had a committee meet with the Church Mutual 3 times. We were not able to come up with a better solution. They started raising the rates 25 to 50% and dropping some of our churches. Park Hunter was part of that, Jane Doyster, who's our trustees chair. And so we thought at this point in time, because of all of the upheaval in the insurance market, that it would be best to go with an agency that it could help be that go between us and an insurance company. And we were very happy with we met with 4 different agencies. M3 really was far above the best one that we talked with. We checked with references. And so we are very happy to be working with them going forward. But as you can see from all the questions today, every church is different. They've built their buildings at different time. They have different structures. They may be at a different size. And so what we are trying is to get the best policies available that will cover the most of our churches so that not every trustee group has to go out and find their own. If each church did have to go out and find their own, there would be some churches that might be able to get lower rates. There might be some that would not be able to get insurance at all. We had one church that looked at 23 different companies before we were able to help them find coverage because of some losses they had. So this is one of those connectional things where we are in this all together, trying to get the best rate, the best program that we can. One of the things we also like about M3 is their risk management program. So if you have had some claims in the past, we might be able to get the risk manager out there to talk with your church individually to look at how you can mitigate that and maybe help get you back in line. But he's also going to be overall doing some preventative training for all of our churches. So that was one overall question. estimating your current policy amount and the, I know that that is one of the things that our committee was concerned about, is that there are some churches that say, Church Mutual says our building is worth 1.3 million and we don't think we could sell it for more than 150. So what value do you put in there? And that may be something that we have to work with M3 Insurance on. Someone asked about anybody from M3 coming out and specifically looking at their building if they have significant questions. Christy, what would you say about that?
Yes, I would say that's certainly an option. I've been transparent with Sarah and the other trustees throughout this whole process, and I'll be transparent with all of you here too. I won't be able to get to every church in the next 3 months, but certainly on an as-needed basis, yes. If there's questions or unique things to look at, myself or my colleague Ted Hayes, who's the senior risk manager that Sarah mentioned, we want to do everything we can to help, and we will come out if needed to see it and meet with you individually.
I have a question. I have a question about an appraisal. I don't know where the value of our church ever came from, but I mean, are you our main sources if we wanted to have someone come out at some point in time next year even, or is there another? Do we contact someone at a bank? I mean, who do we contact for a good new appraisal?
Yeah, that's a great question. For an appraisal, that would not be us, but I do have appraisal company contacts that I could refer you to, or sometimes, yes, a bank can provide an appraisal also. The key is to ask for replacement cost as part of the appraisal. Oftentimes appraisals will only do market value, and the market value to what you could sell your building for is very different from what it would cost to reconstruct the building. Another thing that can be helpful too is if you have any local contractors that you would partner with if you were to rebuild, or if you were going to put on an addition or something. Often contractors can tell you what they would currently today, what it would be per square foot to do that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think it's important to remember too that you're just insuring the building, you're not insuring the land. So
yes,
don't include land values in your estimate.
That's a great point.
Some of you responded that you have been able to contact Church Mutual and get a copy of your policy, and that is great if you can. We tried to ask that question of Church Mutual, and they did not, they were not willing to do that. We also asked them if we could cancel all of your insurance effective 1/1, and they said no, each church had to contact them directly. So we will be giving you information on exactly how to do that to make sure that coverage does stop appropriately. At this point in time, Church Mutual is sometimes helpful and sometimes not. So it would be great if you contact your agent. You've got a good relationship. They should be able to send you your policy electronically. And that would be great if they could, so that you could then upload them.
Just to share with you, I received an email yesterday from Church Mutual and asking for a date when they could come out and do a risk assessment on our church. I think what they're doing is it's an automatic thing that they do on a periodic basis. And it's coming out of their system. So my first thought was, wait a minute, is this being a risk assessment for 3M, or is it a risk assessment for Church Mutual? And it's for Church Mutual. So if you get that email, you just might as well ignore that, because they're doing it thinking that we're all going to be under their policy come January 1.
That was unusual. I got one too. It was about somebody coming out for the roof.
Yeah.
I have not had that in 5 years.
I have a suggestion on your on this form that you're asking us to fill out. Is there any possibility that you could add to every section a place where notes could be made? Because then we can, right in that location for you, tell you what the odd things are about our church versus any other church. And then, for instance, in that building date, if you built your church in, 1910, but you made a massive addition in 1991, you can explain that. And I would think that would be helpful to you and to us.
That's a great suggestion. We can do that. It's a living, breathing site. So right after this meeting, we'll talk to our applied intelligence team and have them add that. Thank you.
Also, I did go online, even though I knew I wouldn't be able to do the whole thing in one sitting because I didn't have all the information together. But even of all the information I had, it's way more than 20 minutes, guys. It's going to take a long time for you to fill all, because no one person in our church has all the information about workers' comp versus, I'm chair of trustees. I don't do anything with workers' comp. So it's going to take either more than one person sitting in a room together and filling this out, or you gather all the information and do it. It's an awkward form.
I think you're right. I think the idea is it takes that long to enter it all in, but yes, it takes some time to collect it all in advance.
Yeah.
It's very helpful now, having gone through this session, to see what information we need to collect, because exactly as you just said, I'm sorry, I don't catch your name, who were just speaking, but yeah, that requires trustees, it requires admin staff, pastors, the people who have the insurance, everything. But I can imagine that the actual entering might take less than an hour. But yeah, there is some research we all need to do.
This is important for all of us. I think it's a shame that Church Mutual is now kind of being a stumbling block and saying, no, this is our information. I'm wondering if each of us contacted Church Mutual and said, send us the information you have about our church. It's our information, not yours. Maybe we could make them do a little work. I don't know that would help us, but it really is. It's a difficult time for all of our churches, I think. And for an agency trying to help us get insurance in 3 months, this is something we should have been working on 6 months ago. But here we are. So give us opportunity to make those extra notes in every section, and I think that should help you and us. Thank you.
We can definitely do that. I'm going to just really quickly, you mentioned the work comp, and I'm really quickly going to share my screen and show you on the work comp policy. So if you can get your hands on your work comp policy, that section, and I've de-identified this policy, that's the gray blocks, but the green highlighted items, these class codes and the payroll, you can pull that directly from your current Church Mutual policy. So the 8868, and then here's the payroll, and the 9101 and the payroll. And if you have an experience mod factor, it will show. So hopefully that helps too. If you can get your hands on the policy, that information, you can pull it directly from the policy.
Christy, I just wanted to add that with Church Mutual, at least at my church, every year there was an audit form that came from them that had to do with workers' comp. And you had to declare the number of employees and the wage information that you just talked about. And also on that same audit form, if you had a contract service and they did not have their own workers' comp insurance, you were to declare them on this audit form. So, we have that. We just have our pastor, and we have a custodial service who comes in and uses our building. So her wages were reported on there because she didn't have her own workers' comp. So on your particular form, there's a portion where it says number of employees. What do I do about the contract service people who do not have their own insurance? Where do I declare them on that form?
They would fall, so from a payroll perspective, they will go into the 9101. but I am going to have our team add a box. So we asked number of employees and we asked for volunteers. I'll have them add a box for contractors without their own work comp coverage so that you can indicate that there. That's a great suggestion, Carla.
You know, and I've never thought of this before. I've only ever put my custodial, but now we have someone come and plow. I guess I have to contact them and ask if they have workers' comp, true? Or how do we determine? It's not only people who work inside our building.
So what you should ideally be doing with any contracts like that, custodial, plowing, you should be asking them for a certificate of insurance.
Okay.
And if they provide it, it should have general liability and work comp coverage on it.
Okay.
If they say, well, we don't have any insurance, so we can't give you one, that's how you know. And I'm simplifying it. Wisconsin has a 9-point test that's complex, and I don't want to bore you with that. But the simple version is, if they don't have insurance, you are going to be paying for them on your work comp policy. And if they were to get injured at your premises, your work comp policy would also pay for that claim. So ideally, you want them to have their own coverage, but realistically, many don't, depending, especially if it's maybe just a one man, guy with a snowplow on his truck. He might not have, coverage.
To clarify on the workers' comp, if there are individuals, we have a 3-point charge and we have centralized payroll, but if there are individuals paid out of the individual churches that are not currently included in our audit, our workers' comp audit, my understanding is that they are not currently covered by workers' comp. Is that a valid assumption?
So they are not your employees? Did I understand?
That is correct. They're also not out of my own church. We do the payroll. If for some reason there's some that are not being paid through central payroll, and my understanding is that if that is the case, then they do not have workers' comp coverage.
I think that we would have to clarify some of these multiple point charges that are being paid out of one. There shouldn't be employees in the other churches that are being paid without workers' comp. So if they are being paid any payroll, they should be covered by workers' comp. So we'll just have to look at that. Sometimes our structure makes things more complicated.
Correct. And this is, individual contractors that probably there's not an understanding that they should be being paid centrally. So I think it's a confusion.
Can I just add something? We're now a 3-point charge. We used to be just a 2-point charge. And when we became 3-point, the question came up, well, can't we just, since we're a 3-point charge, don't we just have to have like one workers' comp policy? And I was told, I believe when I called, I don't know if I talked to Sarah, who I talked to, that in the state of Wisconsin, each one of those churches had to have their own workers' comp, even though it's a 3-point charge or a 2-point charge. That's what I was told. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Well, what Church Mutual told us is that we can share a policy, which then results in a lower overall premium. However, everybody has to be on a central payroll to be covered by that policy.
But these people weren't covered by payroll, though, right? If they're contract services.
Same difference. They have to be paid through the central. That's what they told us.
Okay.
Yep.
Well,
And
I
I
guess
think that
you need to know.
Yep. We do know that the customer service answers that we've been getting from Church Mutual are not always consistent or correct in the last year as well. And so one of the things that we wanted from M3 Insurance also was to help us solidify some of these answers, and we'll continue to find the variances that we have gotten. But there have been more than once where I needed to call back to our agent and say that we were getting conflicting answers from Church Mutual and needed to correct it. So
yeah,
hoping that some of these we can help fix as we move forward.
Okay, this was actually through our representative, not through customer support, just so you know.
Yep. And there is a difference between independent contractors and employees, so we'll cover those too. I do want to honor our hour here and just say kind of next steps from here. So if you have specific questions, and there were some other ones that came up that we didn't answer, what's the difference if you own the daycare program and you're paying the employees versus you're renting space in your building and someone else is doing it? And so if you have questions about those individual things, feel free to contact them and ask those questions. The Safe Sanctuary, if you have that program, yes, that is the child abuse prevention program. We're trying to keep the coverages the same between, but we are also working with M3 to determine if we need to make any changes in those coverages based upon the size of the building or the programs that you have. You may not need to have everything that different churches would have. So we're going to continue to work on that as well. So the next step is to try to get this form filled out as soon as you can. We understand we're asking for a quick one. And just to let you know, the committee has been working on this for about a year. We were attempting to work with Church Mutual. When we saw that wouldn't work, we started getting proposals from other agencies, had the meetings, had the checked for references, selected one, tried to get as much information as we could from Church Mutual. Once we found out what we would not be able to get, that's when they developed the form, and that's how we're trying to collect the information from you. So that's kind of everything that's been happening for the past year behind the scenes that now requires us to kind of gather this information. And we would like to get everyone on the same date. Right now we have 350 churches that all have a different renewal date, even some of them mid-month. We had one church that renews on 12/15 and Church Mutual didn't want to renew them for 16 days. So we've got to work with them. We're trying to get everybody onto a January 1st date so that we can go out as one group, one renewal date, with all the information that we can. And we are going to try to go with one company as much as we can, may not be able to. Christy, what else do you want to say from there about next steps?
Sarah, you covered it well. I will just add in 10/1 is our target date to have it completed. I think I saw some people asking in the chat, like, is there a firm date? Do the best that you can. I mean, the earlier that we have all of the information, the better it will be for us to take everyone together out to market. But we also know that there's a lot of information to gather and it's a short amount of time. So if you need an extra week, an extra 2 weeks, that's okay. We're not going to come barging on anyone's door because you haven't given it to us yet. We'll follow up with anyone who doesn't have it in, but do the best that you can to get the information. If it gets to be mid-October and we don't have anything, we'll certainly follow up another time to make sure that we can get the information, because we want to make sure that you're part of the group and have coverage for 2025. But
for those of us
that
have a date a little later in the year, like we have a renewal date of May, what happens when you cancel coverage? I know that there can be some charges in regard to canceling commercial insurance. How will that work for us with Church Mutual and any premium that we've already paid?
So the work comp will still be audited, so you'll still pay based on the actual payroll you have for that time frame. But the other policies, you will get a refund for the time period of coverage not used.
For anyone who has a renewal date coming up between now and year end, please go ahead and renew and just pay your premiums monthly. And then we will provide the exact wording and how to contact Church Mutual, because they told us they want it in a certain way, but it does have to come from each individual church. So we will make sure that we get that out to you so that you can cancel it timely. They have assured us that they understand what's going on, and that they will provide refunds if you have unearned insurance, that they will refund that information. They will refund any premiums. But we are recommending that you just pay monthly instead of annually or quarterly, just so there won't be as much of a problem.
And I'll also just add to Sarah, you do have that language that Church Mutual, said that has to be used to cancel the policies. But my recommendation to everyone would be, do not send any cancellation notices to Church Mutual at this time. Canceling policies takes 1 day. And so we want to make sure that we have everything in place for your new coverage before anyone sends cancellation requests to Church Mutual, because I would hate for them to misinterpret it and essentially make a mistake and cancel the coverage now. I know that we're over on time, but does anyone have any last questions before we wrap this up?
Yes.
Christy, this is Bonnie Jones. I asked earlier in the chat, can we assume that a safe sanctuary plan is what is being asked for when in the question regarding child abuse prevention program? Or is that a more specific term?
No, that is a yes. If
Okay,
have
thank you.
Sanctuary in place, you are good.
So what happens if the insurance that you end up finding for us is more expensive than what we have?
So that's not really a question that I can answer. I think that would have to be a discussion with you and I assume Sarah, the conference, correct?
Mm-hmm. We don't anticipate that, but if it comes up, I mean, we anticipate that we will be able to get better coverage, better rates. But if there is a situation, please contact me.
I have
question.
I have one question. So I don't remember any discussion about officers and directors liability insurance or loans for employee practices insurance.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch the question.
Oh, okay. So was there any mention of officers and directors insurance?
That would be covered as well.
Yes,
Okay.
we will be providing that coverage. We'll be getting quotes for that coverage too.
Okay. And
Are you also getting quotes for that big liability umbrella policy that we had for the conference?
Yes.
I mean, that churches could be a part of?
Yeah.
Instead of an individual one, a conference or a conference-wide umbrella?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
What date are you slating for the new insurances to take place or to go into effect?
January 1st.
January 1st. Thank you.
I have a question about workman's comp policy and filling out the forms. I'm part of a 3-part charge. I'm the treasurer and do all the payroll for the 3 churches. We have one policy. I have the policy. Do I fill it out for my churches and the other 2 churches don't do anything? How do we indicate that this is shared?
Yes, I would have one of you fill it out and we'll have that notes field added to the section. And in that notes field, you can indicate the 3 churches that share it.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I had a question on liability. I had a question on liability, limits of liability. The question is, if it's going to be under an umbrella, a large group umbrella, do individual churches then have the opportunity to increase their limits of liability if they want to do that? So, for example, maybe we want a $4 million liability policy.
Yes, so there will be options to have your own individual higher limits or your own individual dedicated limits. Yes.
Thank you.
I do want to repeat something that Park Hunter did answer earlier on in the question about wouldn't the conference be the one to decide if you rebuild, don't rebuild? One of the comments that we have gotten from some churches is that if our church burned down, we probably would not rebuild it. We would go rent space elsewhere. We might merge with someone else. And so the decision about what to do is made with the DS and the church together. And so that wouldn't be a Sarah question. That would be between your district superintendent and the church as to what you would like to do with your building. Okay. I think we have to go now. If people have questions, again, I put the link back in there, but it is on the conference webpage. Then go to Boards and Agencies, Board of Trustees, and all the information that you need is there. You're welcome to call me if it's a question about where to find it on the webpage, but if you have a question about the particular questionnaire, the info gathering that you're filling out, please contact M3 because they can give you the best answers there. And again, we're not looking for perfection. we're looking for gathering the information so that we can get a best overall quote, but it doesn't have to be down to the penny or down to small exact items. I know we have a lot of questions about sheds and stained glass windows, and you can see that this is why churches are very odd, because you do have so many different things that most places don't have a pipe organ and or a set of bells that are 4 octaves wide. So there's just a lot of things that could be in there. We appreciate your attempt to get as much information as you can. Appreciate M3 for what you're doing. And if there are any more questions, please feel free to email us or M3. Anything else you want to end with, Christy?
No, I'll just reiterate. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, everyone on the call. Again, we really appreciate your help with gathering the information so that we can put together the best coverage and best priced program for you. And we're looking forward to a long-term relationship, helping you with the actual insurance placement, but also risk management services too. So thank you. Please don't hesitate to reach out to the contacts. I will add Ashley Azelson is on vacation this week. She will be back next week. So if you have questions this week, I recommend contacting Dylan or myself, but Ashley will be back next week and she will be diving in as well.
Okay, thank you, everybody.